Hey folks, I'm Matt from Cut Content, and thank you for tuning in to DM Radio. So for part 2 of our Getting Started with Your First Game series, I want to talk a bit about kind of more specific inspiration. Namely, okay, so you've got this general idea of what tone you want your campaign to be, what sort of scale geographically you want to take place over. How do you get some of the ideas, not the specific stuff like, oh, I would love to have this character who is exactly like this, or perhaps this one specific location will have X and XX secret doors. That's, dungeon design or character design, all very important, but we're talking, you decide you want to run a game, now what? So, right after you've figured out, what kind of game you like to play in, you're going to make a game that you think you would enjoy and therefore other people will enjoy. What comes next? My first step, and everybody has different first steps, but for me, it is always, always, always finding artwork. There is so much art on the internet, and that's like an inane statement that everybody knows, but surprisingly few people take advantage of it. People draw fantasy art. There's concept art for games or films out there. There's people's original characters that they've created whole worlds for that they don't express through D&D or writing a story. They might do it entirely through artwork. There is an unending supply of art that can inspire you. And so I go to a few places and sort of congregate all the art that I can, and I've got a gigantic folder on my computer just full of stuff labeled DM images, and they're just things to provide inspiration. Now, for my money, the three best places to get this are from, one, Reddit's Imaginary Network. So if you go to reddit.com/r/imaginary network, there is a huge selection of subreddits underneath that. It's basically one meta site that connects all these different specific sites. There's imaginary knights, imaginary nobles, imaginary paladins, standard character class stuff. And then there's imaginary landscapes, imaginary battlefields, imaginary architecture, imaginary lovers, imaginary nobles. I already said that one. Doesn't matter. That's my point. Imaginary monsters. And then under imaginary monsters, imaginary vampires, werewolves, behemoths, Goliaths, giants, demons, dragons, whatever you want. It's this massive list that can get you the most specific stuff. I would recommend checking out the top-rated all-time posts, but there are also just on a pretty much daily basis, people are uploading crazy good stuff there. Bonus for that website is that you can check out the comments for these pictures, and they will always have a link to the source material. Now, that source material frequently comes from one of two places, which are the other two places I most highly recommend. One is DeviantArt. DeviantArt may be a colossal shit show in terms of editing and organizing your favorites once you have them, but it is a smooth interface, easy to create your own profile, and best of all, you can find, once you found artwork that you like, say you find something on the Imaginary Network that you click and are like, that's amazing. DeviantArt will give you that artist's name and portfolio, so you can just go and look at all the other stuff they've made, and you'll probably find a ton of things that really speak to you because you like a particular art style, and then you can just watch them and get notifications whenever they post new stuff. It's incredible. I know I'm just describing how, a website works, but most people don't tend to go to that sort of thing for when they're trying to come up with a D&D campaign. And that is, maybe it's less specific than the Imaginary Network on Reddit, but if you're not looking for specific concepts and looking more for general styles, that's where you want to go. Now, the last one that is often frequently linked to is ArtStation. And ArtStation, as far as I can tell, and full disclosure, I don't know anything about professional artistry, but that seems to be where a lot of the more professional artistry does, in fact, happen, where people post, works in progress, and then the final work. I've seen most of the people I follow on ArtStation, I've seen their artwork outside of the internet. I was surprised to see it on their page. I'm like, oh, I've seen that on the cover of a miniatures game at my local game store. I've seen that on the cover of an RPG book, or it's the picture that's on a card in Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone. So I would really highly recommend that you check out all these places and you just collate them, congregate all this art into one big collection, and before you know it, you'll just be sifting through, making a dozen separate subfolders like, oh, all these images kind of work together in this way, or like, this one image gives me an idea for a campaign that I never thought of. That happened to me very recently. And I will post links to all these different websites in the description under this video, but I would highly recommend it. And so, you got your artwork, what comes next? Well, one, don't be afraid to steal unashamedly. It's not really plagiarism because, one, most of the time nobody really knows, and two, plagiarism implies that you're actually gaining something from it. This is just shared experience. It's said that, good artists borrow and great artists steal, and DMing is a form of art, whatever anybody says. Take from books that have specific plot lines that really speak to you, or say Joe Abercrombie's The First Law trilogy, which I've mentioned in my Path of Exile video. It didn't inspire me for a D&D campaign in terms of its plot, although it was a very good plot line, but some of the story world-building aspects I took and made into what I thought was a really compelling world, and it worked out great. And you can do the same thing with not just books, or not just other, RPGs that you've played in before. You can do it with movies. I know a lot of people listen to The Adventure Zone, a popular D&D podcast, and the Dungeon Master so far for that, Griffin McElroy, has explicitly said, I made this entirely based on this one arc based on Fast and the Furious. This other one was based on Alien, and you don't have to, stick to it rigidly, but it can take you to some really interesting places. I've always thought it would be fun, and I've never done it because it's just not quite my cup of tea, but I always love the idea of, like, a Jurassic Park-themed role-playing game where, it doesn't even have to be dinosaurs. It could be all sorts of, maybe there's an organization that's attempting to catalog and keep track of sort of eldritch abominations, or the dark horrors of the world, or all these kinds of demons. And you're being brought into this organization, and there's a colossal failure, a la Cabin in the Woods, even. You can take from... And there are other movies that are, like, a bit more specific that I don't want to say, because I know some people who play my games are going to watch these, and I have ideas, and you are not going to get to know them. Eat it. Just go for it. You got nothing to lose. Nobody's gonna, freaking... I don't know who... Tarantino's not going to show up at your door and be like, how dare you use the plot of Inglourious Bastards? And one, I don't even see how you could make that into... I'm sure somebody can make that into a compelling RPG. I don't personally understand it. Two, Tarantino doesn't care. Three, I don't personally care for Tarantino films, so he's definitely not going to show up at my door. He might show up at my door and be like, why don't you like my movies? And, and Quint, can I call you Quint? When you do that, let's have a long talk. But nobody's gonna be knocking down your door with lawyers saying, excuse me, I'm told that you use the plotline for Shrek in an RPG, and we don't really condone that. We haven't licensed that out, so don't worry about it. These are just places to get sort of general inspiration, but say you need something a bit more personal. Just make things. And I don't mean, go hog wild making... Like, I think I would like to do some pottery today. And, like, that's not going to inspire... Maybe for some people it will inspire you. There's no wrong way to do this. But, just as an example, Dungeon Master's Guide 5th edition has a jillion random tables for rolling random NPCs, creating random dungeons. Just make those. Almost all the time, they aren't going to be things that, like, stick with you. But sometimes they really will. The first ever campaign I ran in 5th edition, I was like, you know what, I'm going to run this pretty by the book. I rolled up a half dozen NPCs, purely based on the book, no editorializing at all, and a story just sort of took shape around them. Like, oh, I can see how these as yet nameless people connect, and they made the foundation for this entire world I've run my games in for the past 3 years. It's pretty incredible. And you don't have to stick to that rigidly. You can just have some ideas reading through the guide or just thinking and being like, this would be a cool NPC. And that NPC does not ever have to appear. You can roll up a random dungeon and be like, this is lame, but this one room or one combination of rooms really works for me. Or you can make your own dungeon that you're like, this doesn't fit in the campaign I have in mind at all. And then either you realize, oh my god, it does, or, oh, I can totally make that, I can transform this into something that does work. Or worst case scenario, you have a great dungeon that you can use at literally any other time. There's no downside to this. And more often than people realize, just, it's a dumb statement and not always that helpful, but the best way to get something done is to just do it. Nike, they are paying me for this. I'm required to say that by law. I believe they're not, but I think if I say that, then they will have to pay me, legally speaking. So come at me, Nike. Give me them Benjamins. Benjamins. Fun fact. That is a slang term for Benjamin Franklin, whose picture's on $100 bills. It's a currency thing. We're getting away from it. Although on that note, I like to change the standard currency in D&D from copper, silver, gold to something with a name like crowns or pennies or whatever. People call them like dragons in Game of Thrones, or like jots in the Kingkiller Chronicles. Anyway, that's a more specific thing. I'll throw that pro tip in for free. But anyway, we're running about the length that I would like to get to. At the end of the day, there's no wrong way to find inspiration. These are just the ways that I find inspiration. If you have more or ones that you feel are worth addressing, please feel free to leave them in comments or shoot me an email or tweet at me. I've got all that information in the description. Somebody just a few months ago was like, the way I do it is I design locations that I think PCs would have fun exploring, and then I build the world around them. And that legitimately had never occurred to me. And I've been doing some of it for a campaign I'm currently running, and it's awesome. And I never would have thought of it. So please feel free to share your own ideas and opinions. What works for me won't work for everyone, but hopefully this will give you a solid starting point to go off of. Anyway, next time we're going to talk about players. Who are they? How to get them? And how to murder their characters without thought or mercy. That I'm kidding, mostly. I'll see you then. Bye.